All right, so debt service, we've got two bonds that we're still paying on. Those both will be up or in about 5 years or so. This is the property taxes coming in to cover that and the expense to pay it.
Okay.
Austin, and with the state on how much money we can, I'm a little lost at the moment in regard to, did the state enact the revenue caps? You know, we have, when our debt service goes away, if it goes away, does that in turn then impact our general fund revenue from property taxes?
It definitely has the potential to. We've got 1.4 million. It depends upon a couple of things. Right now, we are in, I'll call it tier 2 of the bill, where we can go up $500,000 a year. Tier 1 is the 3.5%, but we're small enough where we can go up $500,000. And they have that banking provision. So if you don't go up the full amount, you can roll it over to the future years. So if we don't hit the full amount, if we've banked some and rolled some over from the few years before our debt service rolls off, that increase would count towards the bank, I guess you could call it, of what we would have to collect.
Well, I think as we move forward, maybe you have already, we really need to decide, we need to look to see if we need to maintain some type of debt. I mean, obviously a pay-go type method would be ideal, but it could be detrimental to us too. So we may need to look at, as we do more projects, do we need to issue debt in order to maintain that general fund revenue? Make sure we're under those caps.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So we're looking at 2026 is when, or 2027 is when it would all be paid off. So my tentative timeline, I haven't thought through it a whole lot because it's still about 5 years out, but 2026 and that year, look at the street projects and that type of thing, and see if what we could get for the same amount in bonds on an annual basis. So, but for that very reason. So it's floating around in the back of my mind, but it's not something that I've spent a whole lot of time looking at, in all honesty.
Yeah.
My feeling, I mean, obviously we're not going to get too far down this road, but my feeling on that would be there needs to be a very specific reason and need for us to issue debt, and maintaining a tax rate or some part of a tax rate because of a component of state law is not a good enough reason. I get that we may have some need down the road to issue debt. If that comes up, we can go out for a bond election and at the same time ask them to approve the tax rate. Easy if it happens to trigger past what we can do on our own. To me, I think that's the way to go about it. But just finding a reason to go get debt issued just to maintain a certain level of tax rate, to me, yeah, I don't have any appetite for that.
Well, this is way down the road and not a discussion for today, but there may be strategic reasons to do that go well beyond 2027 or 2030 or whatever. I mean, we don't know what our CIP is going to look like 10 years from now. It could be, but anyways, that's a different discussion.
Yeah. I really think we're kind of jumping ahead until if I remember correctly from our retreat back in May, kind of the consensus or at least the strong majority approach was that until we actually had the Jones Road properties sold, that this was all on hold. I mean, I'm looking at the spreadsheet that Austin made, that the 10-year financial projection. Once we build out City Hall, you really don't have, without dipping into reserve funds, you don't have the money, or even, you really don't have the much room to be able to fund the building out of that golf course.
I'm not talking about paying it out of the general fund or completely out of hot funds. It would take financing. And we've already seen that that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I was the one that proposed that we pull it out of the budget. And the reasoning was we were expecting a downfall in sales taxes because of the COVID issue. Now that hasn't come to pass, and I don't see a reason why we don't put it back into the budget, especially with all of the good things that it's going to do for Jersey Village. I talked to a lot of citizens about it, maybe not a lot. Wherever I get the chance to talk to somebody about it, I asked them about it, and I haven't had any negative comments on it. Now, I haven't talked to Mark, but I'm just saying the general opinion out there seems to be that they want a new event center. They don't care so much about the pro shop. They want the event center.
I'm not sure that I would want to go out for bonds on this right now. We can revisit that in a year if it becomes necessary. But even then, I don't know that I would necessarily have the appetite for bonds for this particular project.
I'd propose COs.
Well, what?
No.
That'll be a no for me.
No,
Yeah, let's kind of go back to the total cost. Are we still looking at a $5.5, $6 million project?
It's under 5. So basically, this is kind of crude. I don't have cost of capital in here. I went with the May numbers. These are the reported May numbers from the golf course report. These are the June numbers. And then I did the 2-month average of those 2 months. But I only used that for my yearly calculation on 7 of the months. For 5 of the months, I did a winter month calculation, which takes this fudge factor right here, and I put it at 25%. So the winter months are 25% less than the summer months. And I calculated out the yearly projections. And I come up with $500,000 profit. This expenses comes from the budget. And tell me if I've got it wrong, Isabel. But this is with a $5 rate increase. What did he say he was going to do, 2 or 3?
I think it was between 2 or 3 that he hasn't taken it to the golf course advisory committee yet.
We'll change it to 3. You got a 12.71 year payback on a 40-year building, a 40-year business, basically. I haven't paid off my daycare yet, and we're 15 years into it. And it's been a very good business. And Greg, I think you stayed leveraged the whole time you were in the daycare business.
By design.
Right. So there,
Well,
I see this as excellent.
Well, Gary, I think we're kind of running around in circles, but you're projecting a $2.3 million revenue when last year we did 1.473. So you're projecting a significant increase.
And I'm not doing it without evidence to support it.
Well, I think if you're making projections, you take an accurate projection would be more than the prior 6 months. It would probably be the prior rolling average for 36 months or some other standard.
Okay, well, let's qualify this. If you take a look at the trend that the golf course has had since Matt came in, he's been reaching a new level basically every year. He hasn't gone backwards. So his numbers have gotten better every year. So why, if you're going to go on a historical trend, why would you expect the next year not to get better?
Because sometimes people don't improve every single year, even if they did the last couple of years.
I know, but I'm going on the evidence, Bobby.
Well, no, the evidence, you're cherry picking. You've got 2 of the best months in the course's history. You've got a winter month that, except for once, there's really only been 1 month that even looks like what you're considering to be the average winter month. This is a
reason. I just supported it.
No, literally the data doesn't support it. There is only 1 winter month that has ever done what you're describing with your winter month total. What was it, 150 something? You've kind of scrolled off of it. If you can scroll down a little bit. your winter month assumption's $154,000 in revenue. That has only happened once, and that is December of this year. Otherwise, most of these tend to run somewhere between 70 to about 120 at the high end most of the time. So I think using
I just gave
154
you-
every single time is not realistic by no matter how you're reading the data, unless you are going to cherry pick the 1 or 2 best months and then project out over an extended period of time.
You're
which I think-
totally ignoring the data, Bobby.
How so?
The data says that he has reached a new level.
What data shows that he's reached a new level and that he will sustain it over enough time to be able to justify spending $5+ million on a new golf course clubhouse right now?
Well, there was no reason, according to your data, that he would have achieved those numbers that he did in June based on what he did in May. And yet he did it. And guess what? He's doing it again in July.
You know
Now,
what?
you don't have any support for those kind of numbers based on the data that you're giving me.
Neither one of us do, but I'm also not asking anyone to spend millions of dollars based on my lack of data, so that no one takes sort of my critique of the data and turn that into that I'm anti golf course. To be clear, I am very much still in favor of pursuing this golf course clubhouse on some level, and probably very close to kind of the point which we thought we were in terms of price point. I don't know that I'm necessarily in this on a $5 to $7 million basis, but 3 million-ish, 2.5, somewhere in that range, probably is a little bit more. Now, granted, if a year from now, if in fact Gary turns out to be the Oracle of Jersey Village and does in fact show that his projections have carried out, then hey, maybe we are looking at a little bit different situation. But right now, I do think that, as the mayor mentioned, the sale of the property, I think, is very key just because of kind of cash flow. We need to make sure that we're being mindful of that at all times. And then secondly, if we do in fact have a better sense of kind of, again, more performance data showing that improvement is continuing, then, maybe we're in a better position to be able to have some clarity. I would also caution against using the numbers right now and assuming that those are necessarily going to continue, because there are just not a lot of activities out there that people can do because things are shut down, or maybe they don't feel safe. And golf is probably one of those things they do feel safe about by comparison as an outdoor activity. So, but I think we need to get past this, past the property sale. And once we do that, then I'll be all for taking, a firm commitment on that clubhouse. But right now is not the time.
Why are you opposed to financing it?
I'm opposed to financing because there's no need to.
Well, yes, there is. If the land's not sold, you need the funds.
We don't need to build a clubhouse this year. I do agree that it's important, but we don't need to build a clubhouse this year.
Well, but I mean, that can be said next year too. I'm hearing
At some point that clubhouse is
I'm
gonna
just
have to be
seeing it being
replaced.
delayed. It keeps getting delayed, and it's something that Jersey Village needs.
I think that we have had a commitment to avoiding, unless absolutely necessary, debt, at least based on statements I've heard from people on this council. I want to see that through. But overall, I also wanted to echo what Greg has talked about in terms of we are continuing to see an approach of fiscal responsibility every year with a budget that reflects a very conservative approach and projection to revenues, and takes an approach of trying to overestimate or maybe be a little bit more liberal with what we think things are going to cost, with the plan that at the end of this, hopefully we have a budget surplus and that we continue to maintain the fiscal health of the city. And even with that approach, we still have, in the midst of this pandemic and all of the uncertainty that it potentially could still bring, we still have a budget that produces albeit small, still a surplus. And I suspect that if trends hold, that we'll still see an even bigger surplus at the end. I'm also encouraged by the fact that we are still on track to be debt-free after 2027. We are still in a position where I think we're going to be able to continue to pay for projects as we go. I think that's phenomenal for the city. It's phenomenal for taxpayers. And frankly, I think it will make future council's job much easier, because they will simply be able to they'll have the flexibility of being able to continue that system. And still, if an emergency arises where they need to utilize debt, it will be much easier at that point because of the fact that we have reserved that only in extraordinary circumstances. And I think that credibility goes a long way with the electorate when you do need to use it. The fact that you very rarely reached out and asked for that hefty responsibility.
We're in pretty good shape, and there's nothing wrong with financing projects. I think, you come right down to it, you put it out for elections and the citizens make the decision on it. So I don't see anything wrong with doing that except for the $6,000 cost of holding an election. But overall, I have nothing but good things to say about this. We're in great shape.